All right, everyone, welcome back. Please welcome Daniel from Zillow, who is here to talk more about Y.App.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, it's more Y.App. Yay, somebody laughed. Because I am a noob at Keynote, I am using slides that I drew in paper. Isn't this going to be cool? You may have been aware the title of my talk was listed as Zillow and Y.App sitting in a tree with an ellipsis. That was an idea that kind of failed. So, in that spirit, I have decided to name it A Poignant Guide to Y.App. Don't be alarmed, I'm not Y. Yes, somebody got it. And that's me, Daniel Stockman from Zillow. I'm a vocateur anywhere that I care to be known. Twitter, GitHub, Politiker, and IRC, which is really cool. You should join it. And the basic question I wanted to address is how do I convert existing pages to Y.App? Why would you want to? Am I smoking crack? I don't know. It's a question we all ask ourselves at one point or another. Late at night, the code's staring at you. You're staring into the code, and here's Zillow's story on the transformation of two of our most trafficked pages into a faster, happier, shinier place with Y.App. Once, there were two pages. Search, also it's the map. And that's what it looks like eventually. iPad, yeah. That's what it is. That's our map. It's gone through many iterations over the years. This is our latest one. The map on the left is basically it's now a canvas map in browsers over IE8. It's pretty cool, if I say so myself. It's really fast. Supports a ridiculous number of map marker things. Yeah, that's what they are. And is really a pretty solid piece of software. The other page being home detail. This is the page when you click on any of those links on that map page, you go to something like this. And you can't really see much of the stuff, but it looks a lot better than that. Trust me, I wrote most of it. Or at least I wrote most of what makes it look like that at one time or another. But basically, this is a page that has many different variations. There's like 15 or 20 different distinct data-based variations. It's a very busy page. It's gone through even more iterations than the search page, if you can imagine. In the general flow, we've observed lots of user testing. People like to shop for homes on our site. It's kind of why we're around. What they do when they shop generally, because we have two separate pages, they go to the search page generally. It's if they start at Zillow.com, which actually is a very common thing. People will go to Zillow.com, they'll put in the name of the place where they want to go, the neighborhood, the city, the town, and we give them the map. They see stuff, they click it. So they go back and forth, back, until they don't. And this is my awesome graphic that describes the process of going back and forth. Now, the underlying reason that they don't stay going back and forth is that it's kind of slow. We are basically sacrificing, depending on your browser and the network conditions, the extrapolated average is 6 seconds to go from a completely rendered map page to a completely rendered home detail page. Basically, we're leaking eyeballs. And that's kind of sensitive for our business, which is, selling them, to be quite honest. But it's cooler than that, because Y.App is our savior to the rescue. And the reason is we're looking for something that will make things faster. I don't think I need to rehash all the arguments for speed. It's a very important thing. There's differences of even milliseconds can make a distinct impact on your conversion rates, audience metrics, et cetera, et cetera. We've all read performance stuff I hope. So, yes, ponies and rainbows. Y.App has them. You didn't know. To be more distinct, we got, just a kind of spoiler, transitions between the search page and the home detail page. From the search page to the home detail page with Y.App, we reduced around 2 seconds. That's not shabby. I mean, it started out around 6 seconds, like I said. That's pretty cool. The coolest part, though, is when you go from viewing a home detail page back to a search page, a map, that went from 6 seconds to 1/2 of a second, 0.5. 5.5 seconds, they're no longer there. And yes. So, amazing perf benefits and corresponding attendant audience metrics that I will get to. But when we first looked at this, we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of concerns. We have a large code base. Zillow itself has been around 6 years. I've been there 4 when I started there. We were thankfully already using YUI, although it was YUI 2 at the time. We have, as long as I've been there, we've never been out without YUI and its wonderful capabilities of organizing, giving us widgets for free, doing stuff that normally we'd have to write ourselves, and that would be terrible. So what if the cure kills the patient? Yes?
Just curious, how many front ends do you have? Just curious.
How many front-end devs are on our team? Company-wide, we have a dozen. A dozen is a nice round number. Maybe a baker's dozen. Yeah, that's actually a fairly recent occurrence, to be quite honest. For a period of time when we were, before we went public, I was one of 3 in the entire dev organization. It was a fun time, I gotta tell you. So, another thing that was already there when I got there was the map code, a previous iteration that was based on a Flash object. But for the most part, a lot of the underlying architecture was already there. 15,000 lines of code. The current, when we started looking at this project about 6 months ago, all of the legacy code had either been abandoned or wrapped into YUI modules so we could load it. So that was cool. But the home detail page, which has the details and the facts and the photos and such, I actually myself participated in a rewrite from the ground up about 2 years ago, and that's around 10,000 lines of code, all in YUI modules, and largely utilizing Y.App base, Y.App widget, plugins, fancy things like that. That makes life much easier. So yeah, we have the sweet map. It was already there when I got there, and it has grown, and parts of it is calcified. It's a big piece of code. But it still remains the performant thing that we need. And the problem is it couldn't live a double life. What I mean by that is that we couldn't have 2 of those maps on the same page. Why is this important? Well, we wanted to have 2 of them on the same page because on the home detail page, when you scroll down, you couldn't see it in the little image. There is a map down there that does other things, like shows the neighborhood and is also panable, zoomable, all those fun things, shows the estimates. And basically, that was kind of like our big blocker. Initially, starting this project, we were almost at the point of canning it because we're like, well, golly, that's a big piece of code that we don't want to own because it's another team. Like my team was the one that technically owns the home detail page. There's another team that owns the search page. We're cordial, but any code base that you don't touch every day, you could spend a month trying to learn it. And it just opens up all sorts of possibilities of regressions and stupid decisions and mistakes and other fun things that are not ponies and rainbows. The other thing, one of the challenges going in was that both pages actually have a fundamentally different layout. The search page, which wasn't very evident on that image, is liquid. It expands as wide as your browser window. And of course, fixed being the opposite of that, it's a fixed width at 980 something or other. It was decided, and as basically our target is like the 1024 matrix. But golly, how do you do that? We're kind of scratching our heads for a while because that's there's a lot of CSS, there's a lot of DOM elements. It got really big really quickly, and we don't have all the time in the world. We actually do ship pretty frequently. We need to. If we don't, people start getting angry. But I like to think of it as Y.App meeting the real world. You make concessions, you make compromises, you find neat hacks that make things work, and you try not to feel dirty about it. But that's software development for you. Quick digression. Remember when MTV played music on TV? Get off my lawn. Anyway, speed. Y.App has it. And yeah, basically by virtue of not making not doing a page rebuild, it's using the same stuff that's already there. Gamal covered a lot of that in the previous talk. Yeah, really, that's the huge thing that was really important to us. Like I said, going from a map to the detail page was around 2 seconds on average improvement. Detail to map was 5.5 seconds reduced to sort of a total of half a second. The effect of this speed increased our audience metrics, which is an awesome word I learned from my PM today. Well, actually last week. But so 20% increased time on site. So they're spending a fifth as much time looking at homes. That's pretty cool. 10% increased page views per visit. It's some weird decimal number that I can't recall offhand. This is the stuff I got summarized. But what it boils down to is millions of people not yet. Millions of people view our homes, data, estimates, photos, maps, cool rentals, and lots of other stuff. That translates to a pretty large increase in absolute numbers. I don't do math that well, so I'm not going to regale you with that. Preserving effort, that's one of our other goals. Yeah, by the nature of not throwing away the page. The map itself is, like I said, a huge blob of code. There's a lot of moving pieces. Memory, which I'll get to, is an issue. And just at the same token, making fewer requests, saving what we have already there. YUI is great for that. We use the loader exclusively for a combo loader that we built with Ryan Grove's help with Camp Combo Handler, because that's pretty awesome, Node.js. And because we did that, every subsequent load would just usually just immediately fire the callback because everything's already there. That was pretty cool. So first thing we did, back up a little bit. First thing the company did was about 3 months prior to our project, our mobile team actually implemented Y.App on the mobile website, which was cool because that meant they spent months trying to learn it and wrestling their code. It gave us a pretty solid foundation to build off of, that being the views. View management was a little different. So just to lay it out, the search page, if I haven't made it clear yet, was preserved, and home detail was not. So that was a transient dynamic page that's thrown away when you navigate away from it. This kind of disjunction of preserved versus not preserved leads to some interesting problems with what you do to set up and tear down event handlers. Because honestly, we did not have enough budget to refactor the entire stack of 2 pages to fit into Vue's really cool events object. Just wasn't going to happen. So that being said, we introduced this custom life cycle. Think of it as a life cycle augmentation. And this setup and teardown, like a unit test case, is run. Setup is run right after the initial render, and teardown is run right before the destructor. So why not just use render and destructor? Well, as it happens, because our views actually are just like the entire page, and we have a whole lot of stuff going on with the CSS and the JavaScript callbacks, we basically needed a way for a preserved view, which will never be destroyed until, well, never. You can't rely on that. And for the sake of consistency, we decided in our view base, our view class, subclass that was the basis for our other classes, we used the same thing. And it also had a neat, technically it's a custom event, but it also allowed automatically, if you had provided a setup or teardown method on the class, it would automatically hook that in as the default handler. So just some ease of API for the developers. And also still allowing the events to control it. And so, like I said, preserve the map, recycle the home detail. And that's pretty much the essence of all of the decisions that we made from this point on, was with that in mind, that the map is a lot of work and we don't want to throw it away. So we're going to keep it. Take it off the DOM, we hide it around there. And we had a lot of fun dealing with all of the event handlers on that, but that's in the future. Great help. This is one of the reasons I recommend IRC, is if you hang out, oftentimes you can steal code from other people. Tvok being one of them, who is very generous, provides lots of examples through gists and whatnot, as well as being very responsive. At one point or another, can't really tell you when, but I was lurking in IRC, and he posted a link to precompiled mustache pattern for Guild Wars 2, which is really cool. But the idea is that you precompile a mustache template into a YUI module, and that YUI module then becomes a dependency of the particular view, given a specific prefix that we do a dynamic loader pattern on it. And then you now magically have a separate and easily updated, independently of the main view file template. So that all that's left over from the view perspective is to just add JSON-P to your model sync layer, which is what we did. Now, that kind of glosses over a lot of the other things we had to do for creating that JSON-P object. This is essentially, and I'm talking about the JSON-P object for the home detail page. The home detail itself, the backend guys and gals did this really cool thing where they extracted the core of that page. It was used to be a single template, and now it's rendered in 2 separate templates to provide either the normal HTML output or the optimized JSON-P output, which is to say the JSON-P output is basically a JSON object wrapping around a huge blob of HTML. That's the thing. Again, we did not have budget to refactor everything about our stack, and as much as I wanted to, couldn't really convince anybody else that we should rip everything up into mustache templates and only request the JSON. So you could consider that V2 or V3 probably at this rate. But the reason we picked JSON-P is that we already had an ability to, at any given point during a page rendering cycle, you would inject script or your YUI dependencies with this simple component that would then automatically be inserted at the bottom of the page in the correct place and inside the sandbox, the YUI sandbox that is. And also we had buckets. I call them buckets anyway. They are we could target individual custom events or DOM event buckets to use certain modules and to therefore fire the whatever script we passed in into the callback. This already existing feature, basically again, this is the details of Java that I'm not really privy to. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with Java on a daily basis. Puts it out as properties of this JSONP object as the literal callbacks that we'd otherwise be outputting into the bottom of the page. So this gives us a way to, in the same JSONP response, not only have insert the HTML, but before that we insert the CSS, which is also in a similar fashion output into a list. And once the HTML is in, we fire the JS callbacks in order, and because they're all wrapped in y.uses, we never have to worry about what's already there, what isn't, because that's the library, it handles it all. So if it wasn't already clear, without YUI, this literally would not work. And that's literally in the accurate sense of the term. Because without it, I'm not going to write all that stuff. And we wouldn't, because we're focused on shipping products, neither would any of my teammates, because they have other things to do. So that being said, there are other frameworks for this type of thing. I've looked at 2 of them, I think, and they're cool, but they're just not, like, they do really well at what the single page app or routable, whatever, but they do not have nearly as much depth, and that's the biggest thing about YUI is the depth. The code organization, the reuse, the attributes, good gravy. Stuff that is really useful, events especially. But anyway, if that's not already clear. Loader saved our chunky bacon. I just already described how we, that's not loading. I love you, AirPlay. Why won't you work? So, anyway, I already described loader. And it would be funnier if you could see the chunky bacon or the next one. But anyway, yeah, there it is, yay. So loader, like I said, meant that we didn't have to do any of the what sounded like really painful parsing and checking that Gamal had to do, or his team had to do. But, you know, loader also enabled conditional loading. Conditional loading we used to make our A/B testing more elegant, so to speak, in the sense that if it was enabled, it would load itself and the map code, which was immediately called. Otherwise, it would only load the map code. And yeah, the conditional loading based on are you canvas capable or not, which is the same flag that we use also to determine whether or not we use our Flash fallback for our map. Switching around back to the view, and actually this is at the app level actually. The show view method, we overrode it. And we still call the superclasses, but before we do that, in our subclass, we are utilizing Eric's old, haven't been touched in a couple of years, awesome module, base component manager, which we also mutilated beyond recognition with some extra hooks to provide us a way to load dynamically the contents of the view that we're showing. The mobile team wanted to do this because, well, it's mobile and they don't want to front load stuff that they don't need because it's mobile. And what we used it for basically was in the same vein. We don't want to load everything we need when a search page loads because that would be a prohibitive amount of stuff. And then each time we then subsequently show, it just automatically fires because nothing has to be loaded. Unless something gets added, and those 20 odd different variations of our home detail page might have a module that none of the others do, and then it just works. So that and custom events kept us sane But to be honest, less crazy perhaps, because boy, it's a lot of moving pieces. YUI test was one of the things that really helped us in the sense that, yay, tests, to be quite honest, we didn't have any front-end unit tests prior to this project. It pains me to admit, but we are swiftly rectifying that. And I gotta say, the improvements Dave's been working on with Grover, Grifter, Shifter, all sorts of those fun things, they're really exciting for us because we're getting a religion on tests. I could talk a lot about that, but I won't. So yeah, next one's hand waving. There's a lot of stuff that I don't have time to talk about, but I'm happy to talk about in person. But I will talk about some of the challenges we had. Internet Explorer 9. So by default, the progressive enhancement in Y.App says if you don't understand push state, we'll just use window.location. Problem with us is that our currently, the map, I should say previously, before this project, used history hash to provide the bookmarkability, the back and forward on the map itself. Like when you pan and zoom, it changes the URL. Conveniently for us, that URL, the URL after the hash, because it was literally like a path string, is pretty cool, is actually the server routable place. But we wanted to make IE9 work with app and not do the page redirects, because if we couldn't get IE9 to join the fun, there really wasn't much reason for us in terms of reach to do it. We'd have to wait another couple of years, hopefully, for IE10 to supersede it. But that being said, we faked it out with science, or just using an override of the server routing variable, which I think at one point 3 different devs all looking at the same code, reading the same comment over and over again, trying to parse what those defaults meant. And we did, eventually.
It's a large comment, too.
It is. It's quite beautiful, actually. I think there might have been a few lessons from Evan's talk earlier that you could have incorporated, but on the whole, it was actually really helpful because it was there, and a comment at all is much better than none. But basically, what this does, at certain points in the history of the project, the mobile team originally was overriding the router.html5 attribute. I was like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. So overriding server routing, by default, server routing, I believe, is undefined. Yeah, so it's undefined. It does this really interesting decision, but if you give it any value, it never ever pays attention to if you are actually able to do push state. So by setting server routing to the value of push state, basically we made it work so that the hash is still used in IE9 and nowhere else that push state is supported. It does violate progressive enhancement to a degree, but in actuality, or in the experience of our current map, it would be basically like there'd be no difference from the user's perspective, and we figured that was good enough. We could have done something more verbose, but actually there really wasn't any other option. If we wanted to use, the other option was turning off the app experience for IE9, and that really wasn't something my PM or anybody wanted to contemplate, because we still, for better or for worse, have double digits audience with IE9, as I'm sure most large websites do, and it's not really going away as fast as we would like. There's nothing quite like a long-lived page for exposing memory leaks. Yay! Everyone loves memory leaks, except maybe the memory. And when I say memory leaks, it's mostly an issue of browser. You look at your taskbar, the memory keeps going up and it never goes down. That's a leak. Most of the memory leaks were event handles. And that's to say, event handles that were not detached after they were no longer used, no longer needed. And this was most frequent actually on various parts of the map. For better or for worse, over the years, there's been no expectation that they'd have to worry about that, because when the browser, when they go to an HTTP, it throws everything and starts with a clean slate. That was all well and good until we actually needed to keep it in memory, and there was a lot of time spent on that. But starting down that road, we established the concept of a page render ID for a given page, for search for the search page, or an actual generated string that was provided in the JSONP object for the home detail page. Now, what this page render ID does is provide a sandbox global way of identifying certain custom events. And those custom events are freeze, thaw, and teardown. Now, freeze, you can think of these as the first two are events that concern the preserved view, and the teardown is the event that concerns the non-preserved view. So when a given home detail page link is accessed, the search page view is frozen. That is to say, all of the events that are attached are detached. When the user navigates away from that home detail page, the search view, which is still living, still in the DOM, or it's not in the DOM, it's off in the netherworld, gets reattached to the DOM and then thawed. What thaw does is reattach everything that freeze detached. And teardown calls destroy on all the managed instances with that matching ID, page render ID. Now, you might imagine that none of the things managed by this had that management to begin with, and the way that we incorporated that was through a base extension. So any widget, any base subclass could get this extension that automatically does all the fancy things to, and a little bit of refactoring around some of the event attachment and whatnot. But basically, doing this means that we can safely and intentionally iterate through a huge list of modules that are instances, that to say, and destroy only the ones that we actually want to destroy, and leave the other ones that are associated with the search page alive, and then we can follow them up, and they'll still be there. It was kind of a mind bender, and it's still some of the issues that we have today, which are much fewer than they were when we initially released it, are related mostly to events. Common leaks, how to plug them. Plug is highlighted for a reason, but that would be a spoiler. And bugger. Sometimes iCloud fails you. This was supposed to be updated, but anyway, this is a bind UI function, just an example of what you might do, say, if you were attaching a click event in a base subclass. So you're already one step ahead of much of our search code, which unfortunately was not entirely rife with UI patterns. But it looks kind of lonely at the bottom there, because to better manage the thing, you would want to do the whole handle cache, loop through it in the destructor, detach them all, and then null out the handle cache. Basically, this is exactly what many YUI-based things do. Plugin, let YUI do it for you. Plugin base, widget UI events. Like I said, the home detail page was largely based with YUI patterns already, and was much, much easier to adapt than the search page was. But yeah, basically the previous way of caching things, and any event, custom events, DOM events, doesn't matter, because they all need to be detached. And if you don't, those are memory leaks. So to do, when we started writing this, app content didn't exist. We hacked in our own static view config to the app, and it does basically what app content does, but a little less elegantly. And then really more models, more views. It's just common sense, really. They weren't, well, because it didn't exist back then when they were written. Many of our widgets really arguably are views. Most of our models in the conceptual models aren't models, they're hard-coded. It's awesome. So yeah, that would be the two biggest things. There are others, but they're not really important enough to talk about here. If you only learned one thing from this talk, like your mother said, clean up after yourself in all things. If you learn more than one thing, thank you. So,
All right, any questions for Daniel? Why is my Zestimate so low?
because I am evil and I have total control over that.
Ooh.
I have a knob in my office. That sounds bad.
Turn it up.
No, yeah, Zestimates are public data, and if the public data does not fully describe the actuality of your property, we can't guess how much something we don't know exists is worth. So yeah, if you want to help your Zestimate, you go to Zillow, adopt your property or your home, and fill out more details.
Oh, okay,
And,
that's actually a good tip. Thank
yeah.
you.
And you also, yeah, you get to see all the data, and it's really cool, and I think so anyway. Yeah. So yeah, basically there is no actual human twiddling knobs. It's all a huge, very complicated math formula. But the best way is adding more data, because that's what we go off of.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. That was a good tip. Any other questions for Daniel?
Do you send two different apps, one for mobile and one for desktop, or is it responsive?
Currently, yes, we do have two different apps. Because we have our base class, the base app, that's confusing. The app base subclass that both of those things share, we do share actually the routes, the URLs are full parity. But we, up until very recently, or possibly still, are using two different maps entirely. Way more consideration on mobile for other, the things. And at some point in the near future, hopefully, we will moving towards more responsive stuff. But for the time being, we don't have that ideal yet in many ways. But yeah.
Thanks.
Given your experiences with Y.App on these two particular pages and kind of combining them, is it something that you would roll out elsewhere? Are there places where you're already looking to make more use of this sort of experience?
Yeah, actually, we are. Trying to think how much my PM would hate me for saying. Let's just say this is definitely a pattern that is expanding its reach within Zillow. However, there are certain classes of pages that we really can't see any benefit of doing this to. One of them being like our forum, Zillow Advice. Yeah, it would be neat, but it'd be a lot of work and not much return. Our profile pages, for the same reason, nobody really goes and browses profiles of agents so much. But I know that our mortgage marketplace is definitely eyeing it with much interest in terms of the responsive shopping experience. So anything basically that involves a lot of browsing back and forth definitely is on the list of things we want to move this to sooner rather than later. So, cool. That's a picture of a corgi puppy that I took, by the way.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.